Andover Board of Health. This is the March 22nd, 2016 meeting. Our first order of the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. If we could all please stand.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have no public hearings before us tonight. We have approval of minutes, but I'm going to put that off until a later time in the meeting. And there's no old business at this point. We have two matters of new business. One is we have staff from the Mosquito Control District here, and we have a local resident action. As the chair, I'm going to take the prerogative and make a change here to allow the citizen to come forward first. So we have a new business item of 45 Elm Street. So if you could come forward to the table so the thousands watching us on TV can hear you. Yep. Just a very brief introduction. You're the owners of 45 Elm Street.
Yes.
Last fall, there was a housing inspection that was done of your property. You were found to be out of compliance at that time, and some work was set forward, and you're here now. I'll sort of fast forward. You're here now to make a request to the board.
Yes.
So the floor is yours.
Okay, fine. So I'm Cynthia Allen. This is my husband, Chris. So we're here tonight because we do not feel at this point that we can get a fair inspection from Ms. Grant. All we're trying to do is find a way to comply with your board's requirements based upon the state mandates and rent our house at 45 Elm Street that we have owned and loved since 1994. It's where we raised our children. We were active participants in town, paid our taxes, voted, and were law-abiding citizens. Our dealings with your department began in October of 2015 when 3 tenants in our house, where our son Keating also lives, the tenants bullied and abused him. After this event, we asked the tenants to leave. They became disgruntled, and one in particular sabotaged the house and called the Board of Health in retaliation. We'd never quite experienced anything like this. Ms. Grant treated me like a common criminal.
We're not here to discuss personal issues like that. I want to hear what brings you before us, and I want to hear what you'd like done.
Statement, if you don't mind.
Well, I'm not going to listen to personal affronts. So if you want to leave those out, that's fine. Let's just stick with the facts.
Okay, well, the fact is that she threatened to have me arrested and forced me into entering an expensive contract with Orkin. Things got very contentious. We were cited with multiple Board of Health violations and told we could not rent our home until we received a letter of compliance. This caused great financial hardship to us. We disagreed with many of the cited violations, and we had what we felt was a very productive meeting with Ms. Grant, Ms. Sawyer, and Mr. Fixler in November, and identified an action plan, and then spent the next 4 months and several thousands of dollars trying to meet the board's demands. We thought we were in full compliance when Ms. Grant, accompanied by Mr. Fixler, came by for their inspection last week. Instead, they stated that we were wasting their time. And I'd like to share some of the specific problems. This is not my personal interpretation. It's just specific things that were said to me that occurred last week during the inspection. As requested, we installed lights in the closets. Ms. Grant said one was too bright, the other was too dim. When I asked her for specifics, she said she would not engage with me. I asked her about the lumens. She said, well, we can't tell you how to fix it. We cannot find anything in the code that guides us on the necessary lumens in the closets. Although we had each window and sash cord either checked or replaced in our 120-year-old home. Ms. Grant said that they were too difficult to raise and lower, that a weak 16-year-old should be able to easily do this. The code is silent on the ease of use of wooden double-hung antique windows. It does say without excess effort. Although we had patched and painted all the closets except one, which the contractor missed, and I apologize for that, Ms. Grant admonished us, saying that we had not painted every wood surface with high gloss paint. There's nothing in the code on this. Although we had replaced missing light covers and replaced missing and defective light bulbs, we had not used explosion-proof bulbs. The code contains no such requirements. We find that Ms. Grant's requirements to be moving targets. They're arbitrary and capricious. We have no confidence that we will ever be able to meet Ms. Grant's demands. Consequently, we are asking the board to appoint an independent advisor to mediate between us and Ms. Grant.
Okay.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Now, when I met with you, first of all, I'm not going over each and every point of the order letter. I'm just going to make a few statements. When I met with you in the fall, three of us, we spent about 2.5 hours, and we went through every item, every sentence, until you were satisfied as to what to do. And I asked you if you had any questions afterwards, and did you understand everything? And you did. It was a very good meeting. When I went to your home, I went last week also, you know, I went with Michelle. So it was my eyes in addition, and I think I was very fair to you and your husband during the meeting, because I told you I was there for you to try to help work this through.
And we appreciate that.
And I was. I wanted to just to get it done so you could go about your business and live your life. But when I went to do the inspection with Michelle last week, you were so far out of code, out of regulation, out of the order letter, that it really, you shouldn't have called us for an inspection. It was a waste. Most of the things in the order letter were not done. They were not done, and the place was a mess. The bathroom, if we were to write a new inspection report now, that there were further code violations that we could have put in there. Your bathroom shower curtain was down. It was filthy. There were certain areas we couldn't get into. So I'm saying, so what I'm saying is that when I read the order letter and went through it ahead of time, and we were looking at it with you while you were there, you did not complete most of the orders on the order letter to do. They were not washable surfaces. They were porous. It's not my job to explain to you how to do it. You can hire somebody. You can ask for advice from an expert. That's beyond what we would normally do. But you were far out of compliance with the order letter. Plus, you have somebody living there. That's also out of compliance. If you're looking to have the home as a rental property, you have to be in compliance with the order letter, and you're not supposed to have tenants.
We don't have tenants.
You told me somebody's living there.
I explained to you that a family friend was there and my son was living there. I was told by the Board of Health that I could not rent the house, and I have not done that. I was never told that no one else could live there. I am not receiving any rent. There's no lease. There's no tenant. It's a family friend. I was very clear. I was very specific about that. And I don't understand you saying that the shower curtain was filthy, because the curtain liner...
The bathroom was... I'm not going to argue whether it's clean or not.
Well, no, you said...
I'm just telling you what I observed.
You said on the television that the shower curtain was filthy.
It was on the ground. It was off the... There wasn't. It was in the tub. It wasn't even attached to anything.
No, you said it was filthy.
It was. The bathroom was filthy. I thought it was dirty.
The shower curtain was filthy.
Both of them. Now, we can go... I'm not going to go through your home and tear apart the order letter. When I did the inspection, you were not in compliance with the order letter, you were not in compliance with the code, you were not in compliance to call your home a rental property. It would be like if you were to build a property in town, brand new, you couldn't have a tenant in there until you get a certificate of occupancy from us, or whatever the letters are, Michelle, I don't remember. Certificate of compliance?
Yes.
Okay. So you couldn't say, well, I'm having a family friend live there until you get a compliance from us. They can't, I'm just telling you. You can shake your head, I'm just letting you know you're still in violation. So we could not give you a certificate of compliance. That's it. And I'm the objective one that met with you and wanted to, I was hoping I was going to walk in, what was it, Wednesday or Thursday we met?
Thursday.
It would be a quick walkthrough. I'd go, beautiful, and we'd be done. But it wasn't. I'd say most
Well,
of
you
it.
actually, when you came in the house, you said it was a beautiful house.
It was a beautiful old home. Of course it was. You can't beat how they're built. But you're taking your personal home and wanting to make it a rental property. It's a whole different area. It's still a beautiful home, but it's not in compliance with the code to become a rental property.
So I don't have any, but are you saying that the house is inhabitable? Because that is not what the order letter says.
As a rental property,
That's fine, I understand that.
Correct.
That's why I haven't had any renters in there. But are you telling me that I can't have a family friend be in the house so that my son is not there alone? For a number of reasons that I won't get into in sort of a public venue. But
Well, I
I
don't
would
need
be
to-
happy to do that.
I
But
don't-
are you telling me that?
I don't need to know that.
But you're saying
The
that I
personal things
cannot,
about, no, I'm saying the personal things about your son I don't need to know.
but you're saying that I am in violation because I
telling-
have a family friend
I'm-
living there.
I'm telling you, you have not fulfilled the order letter that was written, so therefore you are out of compliance. And that's it.
Well, see, I feel that I did all of the action items that we had during our meeting. I know that the front closet was forgotten by the contractor. I apologized profusely. That is, or has already been corrected.
Right.
But there are the other things like the windows that you said that.
I could not open one of the windows. Maybe you're stronger than I am. But rather than get into, again, I
Well, that's
don't
what-
want to get into the points of the order letter because that's not the purpose of the meeting. That's not what we're here for. This is not an reorder letter discussion. We already did that. We went through everything. I have a feeling, quite honestly, that you may not understand how to bring the certain areas of your home to compliance. I think that might be it. Just you don't know how to do it. You may want to hire somebody. You
We
may want to
have hired
consult with
somebody.
somebody. I'm
We
just letting.
have.
You spent
We've done
thousands of
both.
dollars on this.
Well, I can't comment on
Telling
that.
us
You're not in
that
compliance.
Most of the items have not been fulfilled,
It's-
which you're stating.
Correct.
In the public meeting. Then we need another letter that says which items were not complied with. Because we need to take legal action on this. If you're saying we're not in compliance, we've got to find someone that's going to bring this matter before court.
What you need to do is show the order letter to whomever you're going to have help you. And
did.
We have. We have.
Well, sir, there's nothing I
We're
can.
not idiots.
I
You're
didn't-
saying that most of the items have not been done.
That's correct.
We're saying you're wrong. Therefore, we need another letter from you saying these are the things that are not in compliance.
And I need a letter that says that I can't even have a family friend because there's nothing in the order letter that says that I cannot have a family friend stay in the
It's not a
house.
discussion about whether you have someone there. This is a discussion about whether you can use the facility, the building, as a rooming house or a rental place. If you state that someone is living there, that's your prerogative, but once you move into the rooming house situation.
Oh, fine, but it's not a,
It's not a rooming house, it's not a rental.
It was 3 renters
We've
in
been
addition to
without
my
rent for 4
son.
months.
So, but you asked for an approval to the rooming house situation.
No,
No.
that's wrong. It was
No.
never a rooming house to start with. Never have we asked for a rooming house. And in fact, before I rented at all, back in whatever year it was, I called the building department to make sure, because we had never rented our home before. Well, that's not true. In college, we actually lived with some other students. So, but, I mean, we weren't trying to
So
do
one of the
anything.
women had already moved out, so there were 4 rentals in there. And under the
Not
zoning
4
law-
rentals, 3.
Under the zoning law, that is what a rooming house is. So there's two different things. There's a rooming house and there's a rental. So technically, either way, it can't be rented until
My son
the letter
is not a
in
rental.
compliance.
There were 3
But
people.
so it can't be rented, so,
Can't be rented
Right.
until the order letter is complied with by, whether you want to call it a rooming house or not.
It
can't
still,
be
it has to
rented.
meet the
Still-
code
It still is a
to
rental.
have occupants.
Sure, yes.
Exactly.
To have any occupants, not rentals, any occupants. So my son can't live there, and
Your
our,
son can live there.
And a family
member
friend?
can live there.
and a family friend cannot live there.
And any occupants.
That doesn't make any sense.
but that's the one thing I did notice. In the general law, it talks about beyond the first level of family relationship, once your son is very clearly within that role. Once you move beyond the first level of relationship, of family relationship, then it's not, it becomes a rooming sort of a situation, is that correct?
No,
Apartment or, yes,
No.
it's a
No.
rental.
Mm-hmm.
it's not a rental now. And in fact, our son is very depressed, and I would say that our friend there is more the agent than our son is, because Keating is not capable right now, which is why we have Jaime there.
That's,
We are not renting that. On my life, we are not renting that house. I would never do that.
you're still not in compliance with the code.
Fine, so we're not renting.
So
But you're saying that I can't have a family friend live there. I just don't understand that. Show me where that is, because I need to go before a court of law, because I can't have Keating living there alone in that house. We
We
are
need a
not
letter.
getting any income. I need a letter that I can go before
letter
a
from you.
legal court and say, you tell me that that house is not livable. We've spent
No,
thousands.
we're not saying it's not livable. You're living there,
Yes,
and
you're
that's with, no, we're not saying it's not livable.
That's what Michelle is saying.
No, we're saying you're not in compliance with.
To rent.
With the letter that you got in October 19th.
To rent.
Correct.
Okay, so then why, when Michelle went in there, and I told her that a family friend was living there, not a tenant, she said, you're in violation.
There's an occupant in the home. So again, she's asking for compliance on, to be able to rent. To be able to rent, she has to comply with this letter.
Mhm.
That's what she's asking from you today.
Correct. And that's in compliance with the letter of October 19th.
Correct.
So, and Larry and Michelle looked at,
We
in
take
terms of the
the
letters from
rental part
October
right out of
19th.
it.
You're
So
standing
this
by
is
the
what
letter from
she's
October
here
19th?
for.
Correct.
That's a statement from the board?
So where in the letter, October 19th, does it say you can, only Keating can live in the house? It says we
Doesn't say
can't
only
rent.
anybody.
It doesn't even say you can't rent, but I know I can't rent, and I'm not renting. That was clearly stated.
Take that out. She's asking for this, and this is
Mhm.
what she needs to do to make this happen.
Right. Your request is to have the property in full compliance with the Board of Health requirements
So we can rent.
so you can rent.
Yes.
So if you want to rent, you have to be in compliance with the October 19th letter. And
Well,
the inspection, the inspection that we just did with Michelle and Larry last week indicated that it was not fully in compliance with this letter. That's my understanding right now, correct?
That's correct, yeah.
Well, we understood our November meeting changed that letter. Even though I don't have anything in writing, we walked away with a plan of action from that November 19th, other than the closet, which I apologize for profusely. It's already been corrected. I feel we are in full compliance. Michelle and Mr. Fixler did not go through the whole house. I asked for specific guidance. I was told that Michelle would not engage.
I'm going to cut this short because we're going round and round in circles like a merry-go-round. I'm getting dizzy. The order letter is very specific according to the rules and regulations for what you want to use the house for. It was not, you were not in compliance with the order letter.
These are pictures from last week.
Yes.
Mostly everything we saw was non-compliant. So there's no need to rewrite the order letter. You have the order letter.
Am I in violation to have a family friend live in the house? Am I breaking the law? Am I subject to criminal action, as that order letter states, if I have a family friend there? That would be the first question. Can you answer that for me?
She's in violation.
What's that?
So it's an occupant.
It's an
So
occupant, yeah.
it's about occupancy. So the son is welcome to be there.
Right,
Family is welcome to be there.
right.
But anybody outside of that is not.
And that's because,
So-
yeah.
And if she wants to rent, which is what she's asking for, she needs to comply with this letter.
Right.
So then our November meeting is not, the action items on the November meeting, that's not valid anymore. We have to go back to the letter,
But-
which is
No,
not
this is
according
what
to
we're
what the
talking
state mandates are.
What-
The state mandate says nothing about explosion-proof light bulbs. The state mandate says nothing about outside of a kitchen and a bath, which are from the floor to 4 feet up, non-porous, or if it's wood,
We're going over item,
water-resistant.
I don't want to go over every item in the order
But not in
letter.
closets,
There's no need to.
windows, bedrooms, or all the other things. And
the-
closets are not required to have lights.
The order letter is very clear. That's why we met
But
for.
the order letter is wrong.
But that's why we met for 2.5 hours.
And
But
that's what I'm
something-
saying, the plan of action that was created as a result of the November meeting, I understood that was the new order letter.
But-
That's what we all walked away from.
I explained, Michelle explained, and Susan explained the order letter at the meeting. That's why we spent half the afternoon doing it.
Yeah, we clarified the meaning.
We did.
of the letter.
So it's because you were, and there's nothing wrong with it, unless you're used to seeing it, it can be confusing.
Oh, it's not confusing at all.
But the order letter is valid, and that's what you're supposed to follow.
Okay,
And if
well,
you wanna-
I
and-
cite the law, and this is what, we will go to court on this, because I am a law-abiding citizen, I will do what the law says, but I am not going to paint my woodwork high gloss, because Inspector Grant says it needs to be non-porous and waterproof.
Well, no, it's not Inspector Grant.
The law
It's-
does
it's the-
not state that. You're getting lost in the rhetoric. The order letter is incorrect. If you want to go over before the housing court judge, I will show you. I have talked with Mr. Hoffman, who is the expert on this. I have a printout from the minimum standards of fitness for human habitation, the sanitation code. There's nothing in there that says you have to have explosion-proof light bulbs.
Right. You're going from topic to topic to topic. You were just talking about paint. You want to be able to have occupants in your home, rent, have occupants and so forth.
Well, I thought it was different,
So
occupants
there's-
versus renters. There's no difference?
Like Dr. Trowbridge said, be on the first level of family. You have your son, which is fine.
Well, I will appoint Jaime, our family friend, because he is the one who's now making sure that Keating is okay in his depressed state. So he will be my agent according to the law, and Keating will be my relative.
Well, I am sorry you're having personal problems. I
Well-
really am, and you know I am. But-
You said you didn't care about that.
But, no, I told you I don't want you spewing personal name-calling towards the board.
I didn't say any name-calling.
So-
Miss Grant said that I could be
right.
arrested if I didn't
All right.
sign the expensive contract
These
with
are-
Orkin.
this is
That's not
beyond-
name-calling. I've been name-called. I didn't call any names.
This is
I said that
beyond-
I was being treated like
This
a
is
common
beyond the
criminal.
scope of why you're here tonight. You were looking to get a certificate of compliance, and I told you were not in compliant with the rental housing regulations,
It's wrong.
and that's it.
That's wrong.
And
It's
also,
just
I want to
wrong.
let you know, it's not unlimited inspections. It's not. The next time we inspect, there's an re-inspection fee. I don't know if it's $50 or $75, but we've been out enough times. So
You've
I
been
just,
out enough times. You came out once.
well, we have
Michelle.
re-inspection, no, not just me. We have re-inspection fees for restaurants and anyone else we permit. It's not just you. I'm just letting you know that. So I don't want you to be.
But you didn't inspect everything that I had done. You opened 2 or 3 of the windows and said, nope, this is non-porous. Nope, this is too hard to open. Nope, this is not smooth enough.
It's not a 2-hour inspection. We go down there, we look at it. If it's not in compliance,
It's a 10-room house.
I leave. That's it. So I just want to let you know that, so you're not surprised. I think the best thing for you to do is to find somebody that will help you go into compliance with the order letter and understand it. But I'm not going to go through the order letter again tonight. I'm done. Now, do you have any other questions that you want to talk about that you haven't addressed this evening?
I don't understand. I thought that the violation should be based on state mandates. Can North Andover just create its own mandates and they don't have to pay attention to the Massachusetts requirements?
We didn't create anything. We're just following the regulations as such.
Are the regulations Massachusetts or are the regulations North Andover? Because when I asked what the North Andover regulations were, I was referred back to the minimum standards of fitness for human habitation sanitary code, chapter 11.
Correct, that's a Massachusetts.
And is that what you base your?
Yes.
Okay, so why is it that Ms. Grant can say, I need to have explosion-proof light bulbs, when there is nothing in this code that says I have to have, this is just one sort of glaring example,
So
explosion-proof
there was
light
no
bulbs.
Term.
No.
I see.
I told you when I looked at one fixture, one bulb was about this long that hung down, and then you had a short bulb. And to me, it looked dangerous the way it was, that if a child or ever hit it, the glass would just fall in their face. I said, gee, maybe you could put in shatterproof bulbs. What are they, like $3 or something like that? I said that, not Michelle.
No, it's in the violation letter. It's in the violation letter.
But I said that when I was in your home.
But it's in the violation.
Shatterproof bulbs.
It's in
They're
the
not explosive proof, they're shatterproof.
Is it in the code? Can you cite where it is in the code?
I don't have it in front of me, and
So-
nor am I going to do that now.
Well, then can we have another meeting then? Because I need to go through this code. I have spent hours going through point by point and saying, here is what Inspector Grant is saying is required, but
Right.
there's not the law that supports it. So how do I do that? Where do I don't even know how to start.
I would recommend you hire somebody very technical and adept to bringing homes into compliance, whether it be a non-porous type issue that we were talking about. I'm not going to tell you, because you need to hire somebody or get a consultant or a friend that knows exactly what they're doing.
I
Other
already
than-
have.
I-
I already have.
I know.
The
But-
light bulb in your closet is too bright.
So let me
Yeah.
You
explain to the
think
board
there's going to be an
why-
expert that's
Please-
going to tell
Let
us
me
which
explain to
light
the
bulb is
board
too
about-
bright or not?
We're addressing
Bring it up.
something now, please, when we're talking, please stop.
He was
You interrupt, I
talking.
was speaking.
He was
Yeah,
talking.
Yeah, but I mean, but the thing is, I've already addressed the light bulb issue. Michelle, what were you saying about that?
So let me just give a quick example of danger or, the fact that it's a very old house. And again, it is a beautiful house, but, we witnessed a light bulb hanging down, and in that light bulb was an extension cord that someone, somewhere
It's not
along the
hanging
line, had pulled away from the ceiling and hardwired it into the ceiling, and it ran loose down out of the closet, loose on the floor and into a plug. So it was an extension cord, but it had been hardwired into the ceiling. So that was of concern to us. So
That's
we
not
tried
right.
to sort of point that out to you and say, this could be dangerous. It's not, this is something that you should take a look at. So that's what we were trying to define, exactly what those, because you were asking specific questions. So we were trying to define exactly problematic things that could cause her problems if she were to rent.
It's not an extension cord, it's not hanging down. It is, I actually,
So, but with that
Called
being
the
said,
inspector.
we were trying to explain to you, certain things, and it got very confusing as we went along. So it would be one specific thing, you would narrow it down to something, and then narrow it down again, and then break it down again. And it's simple. It's a hanging light with a dangerous cord in it, and we were, and it had just a light bulb hanging on it.
It does
And the-
not. Michelle, you're making this up. Please.
So anyway,
It's a
I'm trying to
light with a
explain to you.
light cover. You saw it.
We're gonna.
We
put
could all
this-
go now
we're-
and you
we're-
would see it.
But we're gonna put this to rest because it's going nowhere. And we explained to you that the order letter has to be fulfilled so that you follow the rules and regs of Massachusetts in order for you to rent the house out or have multiple occupants and so forth. That's it.
So I am
Unless
asking the
anyone else has
board
anything else they want to add. Joe,
appoint a mediator.
Joe, I think you
maybe
wanted to say something before.
Well, yeah, I've been a member of the board for at least 10 years, and it's about the worst personal attacks that I've heard. I find them to be offensive and counterproductive. I can understand your frustration. I too live in an old house. My house was built in 1688. And I read all the information that has been made available to us. I've seen a number of the pictures, and it doesn't seem to me that there is really that much more work that has to be done. I was a carpenter before I was an engineer. I'm looking at it, I'm saying to myself, well, maybe 3-5 days of work, and that's it. You started off, you had some pretty rough things to say to Michelle and to Larry. Michelle is a member of the department, Larry's a member of the board. I've been out in the field with him many, many times in the past, and I've always been very impressed as to how professional they are, how professional they've handled themselves. I hope that we have resolution that's satisfactory here. I know I would be in a position to help if called upon, but this has really been a solid meeting. You didn't have to be so confrontational right from the beginning. What it does to me is I just go back and I say, you know, it's just, I don't know, 10 years. It's one of the worst I've seen for a meeting.
Well,
So that's my take of it.
Mr. Fixler, I did not say anything bad about you. I thought you really tried in November. I made no personal attack. The only thing I said was that I felt I was treated like a common criminal because I was threatened that I would be arrested. That is the only thing that I have said.
Okay.
And that's because I have never, ever been talked to that way and said, if you don't sign this contract, I'm going to have you arrested.
I don't believe that.
doubt that
Oh,
I don't believe that at all.
The Orkin gentleman, it was right there in front of the Orkin gentleman.
No.
And
Don't believe
after Ms. Grant left, he said, I can't believe that she treated you like that. I
Michelle,
promise
I'm-
you.
I'm looking at the pictures here that were taken on 3/17. Now, maybe you think these pictures are incorrectly dated, but when I look at these pictures pretty much tell the story to me here, that this is, I'm not going to use the word inhabitable, but that to have an outside occupant would really be inappropriate here. You talked about a bathroom being, that there was a comment about the shower curtain. In this picture here, the shower curtain is on the bottom of the bathtub.
Yes, because we had just painted and grouted, but I wanted to show that the shower curtain was there, so we laid it
But-
down because I didn't want to
But
hang
you
it
asked
back
for an
up.
inspection to be in compliance at that point. When I look at these pictures, this is not, to me, not be an expert on the code that you're talking about, but to me, just again, looking at this at face value, is not really a house I would have presented to have outside occupants from the close family on. We can show these pictures around, but to me, just without going through the nitty-gritty of this, there's just a matter of cleaning up spaces here that, to get into general compliance before we even get into the very specifics of this.
Well, there's two
You
full
talked about
baths, so
a couple
there's-
of windows that don't open, right from the point there, from the start. That's out of compliance. We're not going to send people around to check in 10 rooms when you do an inspection to find out, are you in compliance fully, and the first couple checks show that you're not in compliance. You don't rework the whole thing. You give it back to the applicant, and you say, we found already that these things are not meeting the needs. You have to go back and revisit the questions. But when I look at these pictures, it raises a doubt in my mind. And maybe you can state that you'd be okay with people living outside of the immediate family in this habitation, but I would seriously disagree with that. Without getting into whether there's a light hanging from the ceiling or not, I think, inappropriate here. And I have to agree with Joe that I felt the confrontational nature of this is just not helping us. You and I talked before we had that meeting when you were going to come before us in the fall. We had a conversation, and I said we'd arrange a mitigation so you could have a personal meeting rather than trying to do it here at the board. Now you're doing that same thing. Because Larry and Michelle spent almost 3 hours working through and putting together an action plan. When I look at these pictures, it's almost hard for me to go through what I see in these rooms and even get to the point of compliance of the specifics in the order letter. I just can't look at these pictures and say this is, at this point, family and immediate family can live here, that's their choice, but when you go beyond that, I just don't see this as appropriate. And to get to the point of the couple pages of the order letter, when I look at this, I can't see this as, whether you're charging somebody a rent or not, outside the immediate family, I just find this not matching what's a minimum standard of the code that you're referring to.
Well, Jaime is living there because of Keating's issues. He had a near-fatal accident. We're dealing with
We're not
Chris's
here
terminal
of the
illness.
why.
Well, I'm explaining
certain
why
things.
it's necessary for him to be in the house. And now you're telling me that I can't do that. And so I will appoint Jaime as my
Our job here
agent.
is to enforce the regulations. You came to ask us specifically to expedite having the property in full compliance with the requirements. That seems to be as to the letter that you got, the order letter from October 19th, I believe. And at this point, we're not agreeing with that. You're not in full habitation. You're not in full compliance with that. I think that's kind of as simple as it is right now.
There was nothing on that list that is major. It's a
No.
lot of little things that have to be done. Again, I don't think it's going to take that much time and effort and energy and money. You said you already spent thousands of dollars. Well,
Spend about $3,500 so far.
well, I
And
just
the
don't
screens are
see,
coming in.
I just don't see that much of an additional expense. I really don't. What has to be done?
do
It's
you-
not that far away
Do you think
for
that
being complete.
in the bedrooms I have to use gloss paint because they all have to be washable and
I don't think we're
non-porous?
going to talk about specifics here. Again,
But who can I talk
It's-
to about the violations, the violation letter?
The
I
order letter
thought-
has the order letter has the terminology non-porous. So,
But it's
you have-
not in the law, though.
So.
Only
a
for bathrooms and
contractor-
kitchens.
Right, a
A
contractor.
contractor that knows the codes, knows
Exactly.
the building codes, knows the housing codes.
He does,
That
and-
person could really help out a lot.
oh, absolutely.
If they chose to go that
Absolutely.
route.
That's why I think it's just a question of learning,
They did have someone that they had hired, but
Yeah.
We
that
didn't hire
person chose not to take on this job.
Yeah.
So we lost that person, and it would be great if they could find someone else that knows the law to help out.
And how to bring it up to code.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that
I
would
think
be
it's a
great.
learning curve on this. That's what it is.
Sure.
I think there are two things that can be done here. We can continue to go around in circles. We can maybe end up in court, or you can just do what has to be done, which is not that much. So, okay, you said one thing. You said, well, gloss paint. If it was my place, I'd say, I'm not going to argue with the board. I'm just going to paint it gloss. It's not that much
She
more
was
work.
asking questions
Do
about
it.
paints and things like that.
Finish
and
it.
wanted to
Oh,
narrow
we'll
it
go
down
on in
and
circles
looking for
indefinitely.
something that was
But I had it painted, I had it freshly painted, and I was told that I used matte, and that I couldn't, matte wasn't good enough, I had to use gloss.
She's sort of manipulating that into.
Until
that's
this
what
is
we're telling her
resolved.
to do. We're not
Yeah.
telling her what to do.
I think,
We're asking her
I think
to
we've
just.
said as much as we could say
Yeah.
about maintaining compliance with the order letter. I don't see much more we can go over.
Until this is resolved, you're not in position to rent the place.
I understand that. I have not rented it. So
But there's
I,
not that much more that has to be done to resolve it.
That's what she's asking here. So she's asking to rent it. She
No,
wants to
I'm
be in
not.
full compliance.
No, I'm-
So that she can rent it. So that was the request in front of you tonight.
So the answer is no.
no, I'm asking to have a mediator. I'm trying to find out whether or not we're going back to the original letter of October 19th, or whether we're going with the letter, the action plan that I thought we had created in November.
The notes, that I'll comment on, the notes that you took, we were really helping to explain the order letter. I mean, that's about basically what it was. We were trying to explain the order letter to you. You're better off finding somebody that can bring it to code, understand the order letter, and this will be done with. And then call us when you're ready for inspection. It's just like when we go into a restaurant. If they're not in compliance, we'll say to them, when you're ready for a re-inspection, call us. We don't tell them how to do everything, because that's not our job.
So
They have experts for that.
Okay, so I have to ask our family friend to leave Keating alone in the house. Is that what this board is telling me
We're
tonight?
not saying
Right.
anything like that,
Okay.
and nor are we commenting on anything like that. That's
Okay.
your saying things.
Okay, I just
We are
want to make sure,
We
because
are
I
not
heard,
commenting on anything like that.
I was told I was in violation, and to
And-
me, I'm afraid that that means criminal prosecution. And that's what I'm trying to, I'm trying to find out whether or not it is okay. I would like to have Jaime continue to live there. He's not a renter. I would like him to live there because of Keating. I would like to
If she
do that.
chooses never to rent again, then she does not have to do anything. But this is about rental, so
Right.
she's asking us to be able to come into compliance so that she can rent.
So
Right.
So,
it's okay.
But when you have an occupant there, you're not in compliance.
right, so right
Exactly.
now, she's got an occupant in there, and she's looking to rent.
Right.
But I think she's saying if this person never rents, is it okay for that person to live there? I'm kind of hearing two things.
So, if she chooses never to go out there and rent again, and there's no one that's coming in to rent a room, then she really doesn't have to be in compliance. And that was explained in the meeting.
Right.
So, but if she wants to rent, she has to pull this into compliance.
Mhm.
So, right now, she has an occupant in there. She can't have occupants in there if she so chooses to have, to go forward and rent. So she
Make it
shouldn't
rent
have,
property,
yeah,
exactly.
she shouldn't have anybody in there if she's going forward to rent right now. But if you choose just to have this as your home, that's a different story. So, yeah.
But the secondary person that's there beyond the family is living there, paying no
Correct.
obligation. Someone living there with no
And
rental
occupant.
obligation.
She can
Is
have
that-
family in there.
Mhm.
So, but again, I'm gonna go back to what she's asking. So she wants to rent.
Mhm.
And right now, that person being an occupant in the home is in violation.
Correct.
So she's looking for something from us
Mhm.
as renting. If she so chooses that she wants to have family and friends live there and doesn't ever want to rent, that's a different story.
Different story.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's okay if our family friend stays there? You will not, that's not
Do
against...
you want to rent?
I cannot rent until I'm in compliance.
Do you
When I-
want- But you're asking us that you're asking us to be in compliance today so that you can rent. So right now, if you're going forward and that's the direction that you want to move in, to rent, then yes, that person is not supposed to be there.
Correct.
If you just want to have, that as an open house and have family and friends live there,
Then that's okay. All
then
right.
that's a different
So
story.
I just want the board to know, I will continue until Keating gets better to have Jaime live there. If we feel like we can get it into compliance, I'll bother you again. I will, I don't know what else to say.
That's it.
Right?
That's it.
Okay. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. So what's the next topic?
Mosquito.
Mary, you want to come forward? Now that we're warmed up.
Gary and John, thank you very, very, very much
Well,
for
no,
coming
thank
here
you for
tonight.
inviting us. We definitely, I'm new to the position. I've been there about 7 months, and I'm thrilled about being in the position, but I'd love to have a chance to come out and meet the communities. And the first move we made was to bring on a consultant. John is a former municipal mayor on the North Shore, and we brought him in to work with us part-time for the year, just specifically to work on community outreach and to find out how to better the relationships between our communities. I didn't expect Zika virus to pop up this year, but it's even more better to have a better relationship with everybody as some of these more...
You said he's a former what, mayor, you said?
Town administrator, mayor, town administrator, and
On the North Shore? Okay.
Yeah, so he's been in the municipal side, and he's now on our side trying to help us make sure that we understand how to reach out. We're literally a state organization. Some people don't realize that we're state employees. I just found when I came in about 6 months ago that having spent many years in private industry, and I have a degree in entomology, that I thought it was just time to sort of start from the beginning and start talking about the mosquito district that we have as a partner of the municipalities, how we work with you, how the state funds us through you guys, and just talk about some of the misunderstandings around mosquitoes and treatments and what's in and what's out and what's good and what's bad. And there's just without overwhelming people with information, gobbledygook, there's a lot to talk about, but just trying to make sure that people understand virus cycles and mosquitoes. So I've been there about 6 months and I'm thrilled. So I'm actually, you're my very first Board of Health. I'm going to pull together a Board of Health meeting later in April at one of the Topsfield Gould Barn, where the old, much like Esteban, who was the former entomologist in our district, did, just to start working on the boards of health and the community of health. And we'll see if we can get LD Maria to show up or not, and to get some talking about some commonalities around what epidemiologists worry about and what entomologists worry about and what conservationists worry about. So that's sort of my opening. I didn't mean to make an opening pitch, but I guess I just did. So that's what I'm here to do. We've sent you a vector management plan, which I'm not sure what you want to talk about specifically, but we also have coming this week a best management practice plan, which is in draft form. I have a few of them here if you want to see what those are about. But those will all be going out to you to talk about a little bit more specifically what we're doing for North Andover versus what we do with some of the other communities. So that's, if you have any questions.
So the BMP is what will come to specifically actions locally.
Yes,
Yeah.
BMP is specific to each community because each community makes decisions based on citizen input and whether we have some communities that allow their citizens to call us up and go, could you spray my property Thursday night? And we can accept that call from that resident. And other towns are like, not unless the Board of Health says you can do it, so we don't accept those calls. So we do that town by town and structure by structure. I have some towns that have specific requirements or requests about what we use for adulticiding. Generally, as a state, as certified state pesticide people, we feel we can generally use what is certified and approved by the state on the state list, because we are regulated under the MDAR, the Mass Department of Agriculture Pesticide Group. But for some, we are converting from one adulticide to another, and part of that was prompted by some of the community saying, what can you use, what are our other options? So we're calibrating some sprayers, and we're changing things and moving ahead, and we'd like to work with the communities on things like that.
That's great.
Well, so again, generally, I mean, we've made a couple changes in the last couple of years. It was 2 years ago, we put into place some more local requests to do spraying. We had generally done more regional spraying when we found positive testing from the mosquito trappings and so on, that we would get a recommendation from your staffing level, and then we would choose to, with your advice, we would do local, broad-based, or even town-wide sprayings. So I think it was 2 years ago, we chose to allow local streets, not quite to one house, but more local sprayings on a sort of an ad hoc basis. And we have the last couple of years a sort of a handful of requests like that. For several years, we've done, the board has ceded to the chair the right or the ability to request to you to authorize spraying on a semi-emergency basis, because it always seemed like these tests came in on Friday afternoon, right?
They do, and I can talk to you about what we're doing to mitigate some of that panic on a Friday afternoon, but we are on this DPH
Well, it always
schedule.
came to me, so it's not too panicked.
Well, it's the DPH schedule that they come in and they test us on Thursdays. So I'm actually, because I have a degree in entomology and I have some background as an analytical chemist, I've actually requested that at least locally we do some early ramp testing, some early identification. We will still wait for the DPH for the official, but if we see something a little earlier, hopefully we'll be able to find out a little bit before because we send the mosquitoes down on CO2, so we send them down on dry ice. Then they test them overnight, and then we get the results back Friday morning. We're hoping that we will simultaneously test so that if we see virus, particularly I'm thinking of West Nile right now, so we can look for West Nile in a kit, basically a clinical kit, an antibody clinical kit. It is not the definitive answer, but it is an indicative answer, and if we think we see that, especially if we see something in the towns around you, as we have in the past, we can start saying, well, we're going to proactively spray. Last year, we did that in Winthrop before we got the test back, and there was a positive in Winthrop last year. So we've got good feelings, but because I'm new, I love instinct. I prefer chemistry, so I'm going to try to do, we were actually, not to be punny, but ramping up. We actually are increasing our skills, and we've hired a new entomologist who is not new. She was the privately employed entomologist for the state of New Hampshire and the state of Maine. So we've got her in the district now. She's pretty well known as a practitioner around the area, very well informed with the CDC and the departments of health, and she's great in the field. She's awesome. We have lots of people who can identify mosquitoes, but she's ramping us up with new CDC traps, which are which are slightly different design for your surveillance traps, the CO2 traps, which are less lethal for the actual capture, so we can capture more and find them in better condition, which we think will be better for finding virus, because less desiccation of the mosquito will increase virus life. So we're changing over to CDC traps, slightly different light design, and we're starting to put a little bit more emphasis into some of the stationary traps or gravid traps, which we think, and I don't want to presume, but we thought about these Aedes mosquitoes earlier before the Zika virus problem. We've been thinking about them because of dengue and chikungunya anyways, which are the Aedes mosquitoes carry them. And the Aedes mosquito, and forgive me if I'm being a little, but I always say to my friends, think of mosquitoes like breeds of dogs, right? Some of them behave very differently than others. So Aedes is a day biter and a clean water thriver. So they look for different traps. So we've been thinking about Aedes for a long time. The Asian tiger mosquito, I prefer to call it that over Aldopictus because I find Aldopictus difficult to say. But the Asian tiger mosquito is an invasive mosquito which is coming up through southern Massachusetts and coming up to, it's not here yet, but we've been trying to figure out how to trap that anyways, and it has been hinted at as one of the Aedes mosquitoes for some of these more tropical viruses. It's a cousin of Aedes aegypti, which is the dengue mosquito. But it is a more aggressive and an overwintering type of mosquito. So we've been starting to do more traps and testing, and you'll see that in our next year surveillances. See how that goes.
The vector management plan to address mosquito-borne viruses certainly has been wise and effective. Few, if any of us, really know of other people that have suffered from Eastern equine encephalitis or West Nile virus. But all of us know, or most of us know, I should say, people who have suffered from Lyme disease. And as such, it seems that the monetary appropriation is skewed to mosquitoes. We can see them. We can feel them. We can hear them. We don't see. We don't feel. We don't hear the tick until more often than not it's too late. So can you comment at all about where to from here? Because I think that there's a monetary imbalance between the two.
And I'm not an epidemiologist, and I'll start out by saying that I'm an entomologist, which means we're talking about ticks, which is an arachnologist, right? So I didn't have as much tick background. But I will say this about the complications with tick. When we talk about mosquito, generally we're talking about virus. It's a short-term, 2 weeks in, 2 weeks out, treat it, done. Flares, not flares. So you have a flare of virus, you find triple E, and we know where to find it. It's in a swamp. It's carried by melanora. We know where they bite. We know what bridge vectors we look for. We know exactly where the virus is slowly growing, hits, flares, we can bring it down. That's a mosquito virus cycle. We don't see virus until June, July, because the mosquitoes are there and the people are there, but the virus isn't there. So that whole cycle has to sort of peak together. Climate change is changing that a little bit. But the West Nile virus and the triple E's, those can flare up and knock down. So when you put short money or good money in those kind of flares, it's a very effective treatment. So when you start talking about ticks, you've got at least a 2-year cycle, and Al DiMaria is much better with this with DPH than I am if you've been to any of his lectures. Ticks go through an infant cycle, a young cycle of instars, which have nothing to do with humans. It's all your mice. It's all the mice running around your leaves. It's all capturing and all that virus gets picked up, the bacteria in this case, most of it. All that bacteria gets picked up in this cycle that has nothing to do with people. So you don't catch it until you're already 2 years into it. And it makes it a much more difficult control. So the control ends up, what they're trying to do.
Can you say that, so it starts with the tick, then goes to the mouse, and then the human, it wouldn't sort of get into a human population for 2 years down the road just because of the way the passage works?
Generally, the ticks, according to what I've heard from the State Department of Public Health, the biggest bacterial transmission is in the nest of the rodents, which is the early instar ticks, which when they're very young, first and second nymphs. So that's their first summer before they're adults. They carry that all the way through their adult cycle. Then when they're in their adult phase, where they can bite multiple times, they're transmitting the virus left and right. What they've been starting to do in municipalities, and we can certainly talk to, the one website I've seen is Boxford's been focusing on this a little bit. They've been putting traps with cotton impregnated with insecticides so that the mice carry it back to their nests. So they're catching they're catching the tick in the nest really early on, and they're doing it in this sort of community way. It makes it that long cycle, that bacteria infection, which is not generally like a viral infection, it tends to be a little harder to see sometimes. And the titers, I'm not confident I can talk to titers, but I think that whole, some people, even with virus, some people get it and some people don't, but some people show symptoms and some people don't, is what I should say. But the tick monster, that being said, we've got this interesting, complicated issue. And mosquito control has been around for a long time to deal with these flare-ups that are very effectively knocked down. We can do very effectively in 2-3 week cycles. The tick cycle, I think, is a challenge. I think we are definitely talking about doing more monitoring this year, so we'll be monitoring ticks much like they do in Maine. The investments around the mosquito districts will probably at this point only be in some surveillance. Treating ticks, they're a tougher bug. They don't have they're not a fly, so a mosquito is a fly. It sits around in the water, its first instars, and it's all this gushy, larvae, easy to get to. A tick is a tick from the beginning. It's not a complete metamorphosis. It's a hard-shelled little devil from the very beginning, and it's just tougher all around. So to your point, I think the strategy around them is much more complicated, and I think probably is a much larger solution than what we do to manage the virus that we do with mosquitoes. But I don't know if I answered your question, but the scale and the temporal scale, the time scale, and the species scale are much bigger in tick-borne disease, and I think it's we talk about it all the time. It's a huge challenge, and we are not ignoring it, but the commissioners who I work for, who are town representatives, definitely feel that we don't have, in any of the districts, the capacity at this point to approach it as effectively as we can pick mosquitoes.
You say it's much more of a challenge. The stats are that hundreds of thousands of people get Lyme disease, and it's a handful get mosquito-borne viruses, comparatively speaking. So again, it's quite an imbalance. Getting back to the mosquitoes for a moment. Now, Dr. Tobert said we have a spraying program here in North Andover that you could opt out on. I've always wondered how effective is it? Or does it just make people feel good? Because you have a vehicle that goes down the road and sprays the houses.
Yeah.
How far does it penetrate?
Yeah.
Does it penetrate 100 yards? Does it penetrate half a mile, a mile? What
outstanding-
percentage of the mosquitoes is going to kill?
It's an outstanding question.
Is it just to make us feel good, or is it really effective?
It's an outstanding question. Okay, so we do more for you than adult spraying. That's the adulticide. The whole trick of doing, I always say, the whole trick of making something look easy is to do all the work up front. So if it looks easy, or if it looks simple, then hopefully somebody's done a lot of pre-work. What we do here in town is we do a lot of catch basins. We'll do a lot of water. We'll try to catch, again, remembering mosquitoes are flies, and they have the maggot stage, which happens to be a water phase. If you catch them in the water, almost to the very end, they're very vulnerable. They're very vulnerable to eat bacteria that will kill them. It makes them sick to their stomach and they die. They're very vulnerable as that form, that larval form. There's 3 instars, 4 instars that happen, and then there's a pupal form where they're tougher. But even as a pupal form, they live just under the water. So in the old days, before we were environmentally aware, we would just throw oil on top of it and they would all suffocate, right? It's a very effective, there are some very effective ways to deal with it before you see them flying. And that's what we'd like to do. And that's where we spend a huge amount of our investments of all the catch basins we
That's
do
what I
in the
remember we've
wetlands.
heard over years, is you, starting about May or so, you'll
Yep.
do the catch basins and doing the biologic treatments, and
We started.
at some point I heard how many catch basins there are just in North Andover. It's like 400, I think.
We did 65,000 catch basins in the district
In the
last year.
district, yeah.
In the district.
So
not here.
we started larvicide, we started inspecting larval sites today. And we found live mosquitoes in fresh water and a lot more live mosquitoes in salt water. But we started today because we've had such a crazy spring that we want to know whether or not we have to go. We'll get our seasonals May 1st. So to your adulticiding question, assuming we do everything right, we never ever have to spray adulticide. So the communities are like, what do we need you for, right? But let's just say we've done that, we haven't quite done the job, or that the adulticides have come up. So what you're trying to do in the ultra-low volume sprays are chemical fly swatters. I mean, in the old days, we used to do long-term, those older organophosphates used to hang around for a long time. That's where the beekeepers would go. Everyone would get really upset because it would hang around. Now we go out at night with essentially a low-volume spray that goes up, probably not that far off the road. I don't have the calibration off the top of my head. But the fine mist goes out, and we can calibrate it so that you can't see the mist or you can't see the mist. That's all in the mist particle calculations. Some people like to see the mist, and that they calculate their particle size appropriately. But essentially, when that chemical goes out, it's an instant fly swatter. When it hits, it drops, it's dead. And what that does is it knocks down viral carrying mosquitoes that we think are in the vicinity of high population areas to reduce your risk. So we're doing a risk management. We're not doing it to make people feel better, because it's more. So I was an entomologist. I took all my entomology classes in the 70s, and all my professors were guys who'd been around during World War II, and they realized, and most mosquito districts realize, the biggest harm we can do ourselves is to indiscriminately spray or not explain to people why we're spraying. So we try to really make that risk analysis, and that's why we go to boards of health, that we make the risk analysis with them, and to make sure that, so we can have a viral load in a mosquito in your neighborhood that doesn't bite people. Again, if you think of mosquitoes like breeds of dogs, there are lots of mosquitoes that bite birds, and there's lazy mosquitoes that only bite fledgling birds. They don't even like to try to fight a bird that's moving around, okay? When those mosquitoes get full of virus, we have a warning hat, but we don't start spraying. We don't say there's virus in North Andover, let's start spraying. Right? We wait for that mosquito to hit a bridge vector, somebody who bites a bird, potentially could bite a bird and a human being. That's when you get into the common house mosquitoes. And those will start flying this week because they overwinter as adults. You'll see them, but they won't be viral. They'll be up, they will have overwintered in your house. But when those mosquitoes start seeing virus, meaning they've either they couldn't get to their preferred blood source, or they're biting birds and people for whatever reason. And West Nile, oddly enough, happens more in drought because the birds fly away, and these mosquitoes that like to bite birds tend to bite people because they don't fly very far. But we will look at the mosquito species that's got the virus in it. Then we will call you and say, yeah, we not only have virus, we have virus in a dangerous mosquito. And that's
Right,
when
we've
we
heard
call
that
you.
before, that a
Yeah.
non-human biting mosquito can carry the virus, but we don't need to attack that one. It's an overkill. It's only when the 3 or 4 that locally that go to humans.
So if you
But
find
I
it
think
positive,
what Joe was
cure us.
asking about, though, was this opting out question, was that if there's a street of 10 houses and house 4 says, I opt out on March 1st, is that a good, does that protect, I mean, sort of, is that a protection to them, or is that, I think that's what you're asking about, right, Joe?
That too, yes.
The fly swatter stopped stopped hitting flies on that part of the street. And then, so if there's, and we're very careful because especially up around here where we have federal protected waters, because the Merrimack River has some water basins, I'm not sure if it extends into this part, but there's some federal, we have to be careful where the wind is blowing, so all of our drivers have to know where the blow is, or at least have to be somewhat aware of it. So we do try to pay attention to it, but yeah, if everyone on the street but one person opts out, it's probably a little less of a risk reduction. If you see virus, Board of Health, you can talk to us and we can do the risk assessment. You guys can usually tell us a risk assessment is high enough that we're going to go out because the danger is high enough that we'd like to spray this area because we found enough virus there that we're concerned that we'll get a bite for the young or the old that are probably going to get very sick.
And that's, for years, been our most traditional approach. I think some time ago in the BMP, it said there had to be a meeting, we had to approve that, and again, the board for several years has, I don't know if you call it a clause, or sort of added a piece onto the BMP that says that with communication through the department, the chair could authorize that with quick communication to the board so that we're aware, but we weren't requiring to have a meeting. Because a couple years we had to have meetings, and it takes sometimes several days or almost a week to get to that point, which isn't best for you, I think, so.
Right. Well, and I'll just say this for anyone who's been around long enough to think of county government. I grew up in Middlesex County, so I think of mosquito control, even though it's not a county government, as it's your county government. So you guys pretty much get to tell us what it is we can and cannot do for the municipality that you represent. So I'm never there to make it more difficult for you. The state does not have my enabling legislation. The state did not allocate me. The municipalities in 1958 did the enabling. So we really are bottom up. The state down stuff is a little bit new. So everything that we try to do, we try to make sure that we are reactive to the communities. And of course, paying attention to our Boston-based control boards, but we really do make sure that you guys get as much flexibility, whether it's the May 1st thing, an exclusion, or making sure you guys have a chance to talk about what it is you need in your town.
What we do, Mary, is we follow the state guidelines for people to opt out, so if they don't send it in certified, well, I don't know if it's return receipt, that's it, so they can't. Also, we have a form that we fill out if we wanted a spray, and we find, we send it into the health department, and then they fax it in. I've seen, though, the form will go in, and might list a few homes, but then I've seen the Northeast Mosquito District expand the spray to, rather than just do 2 or 3 homes or a small, very small area in a road, they may do the entire section because they're there, and they might find it more beneficial to do a larger area at that time than do a couple homes. So I've seen that happen too, which is good.
Can I mention one thing?
Sure.
One thing I wanted to mention is more of a practical point of view. After I've been working, I was in municipal government for 35 years, and I've just started working with the agency last year until Mary came along. Then I'm here as doing a community liaison. But one of the things that I've found listening to the mosquito control is the science behind what we do and the controls that we use. And I've seen a huge difference in the 20 years I've lived in, or 43 years I've lived in the Newburyport area, that people used to attempt to control mosquitoes on their own. using malathion, using everything else. And if it said to put an ounce in the sprayer, you usually put 3 ounces in so that you could take care of it. That was something that was very detrimental to our neighbors, to ourselves, and things of this nature. That I see the larviciding, the different techniques that are being used for proactive to eliminate the major, shall I say, invasion of the mosquitoes, which thus allows the homeowner not to attack them in such a non-scientific way. And I've seen that in my neighborhood. I've seen it in other neighborhoods, that the work that the mosquito control has done in a more scientific way has really done what you had mentioned, is that we've kind of controlled some of this. We've controlled this. And maybe, like one of our commissioners said, you got to watch how good you do, because sometimes you can put yourself out of business. But and like you said, unfortunately, I do have the experience with one of my wife's very good friends was one of the people that died of triple E a couple of years ago, because like in many situations, people who are on chemotherapy lose their immunity and or diminish their immunity, and that's what was the situation in this particular
I
case.
also want to add, so when we approve a spray to go out, these are all certified pesticide people, all passed the law, we usually send them out with a GPS with lights that say turn on and turn off. So it is not normal for an operator to make those decisions in a vacuum, and if it's 1 or 2 houses, I would want, if you found that again, we should probably have a conversation about whether you thought that was the right thing or the wrong thing as the Board of Health, because you guys can make a decision that if you're only spraying, if you think you have a virus in a section, and we've looked at, and we can get you the scientific information that you need to figure out what you want. But it's just
I'm not saying it's not bad.
Based on what we thought was virus. This is more sort of a nuisance control, to be very honest.
Personal.
Yeah.
Strictly personal.
We do a street or a group or a neighborhood or something, but it wasn't that we thought there was mosquitoes somewhere that you guys didn't know about.
No.
Right.
All the scientific piece of this is what advice and guidance we took from, I'll just say you. We weren't doing our own decisions on that. That was, again, kind of on the nuisance control. And I think we understood kind of that's not really a scientific approach, but still a lot of mosquitoes are a lot of mosquitoes, so.
Nuisance, it's a quality of life. It's a quality of tourism, it's a quality of your municipality, it's a quality of just existing in
So you might see the forms come in, and I know a couple times they made it a larger spray in that area because they felt it wasn't going to be as effective as just doing 3, 4, 5, or 6 homes. That was fine. It worked.
Well, and that's what's important. We work for you. We do. We work for you. Whether it's when a town clerk says to me, all these exclusions came in by March 1st, I'm like, fine, just give me the list. Because the law, the regulation you're following, you do that every day. I work for you, give me the list, and we'll work with that. So that's the way. That's kind of the way we've been going forward. But if you ever run into it, we're working to mechanize the fleet a little bit more. I'm really working to make sure that at someday, my magic thing is like the picture behind you, some magical day you all will have a dashboard that the Board of Health can go to. I want to work for the municipalities, not for the public. I want to work for you guys so that you can give good information, so that you have us as your scientific backup that is local to you. DPH will always be DPH. They will always be the folks that we need to go to for the big decisions. But up here in the North Shore, we have mixed lands that they don't have anywhere else. We have wetlands that aren't like anywhere else. You guys have landing turtles right around the corner. You've got all this stuff around here that's endangered, and you've got to be very cautious about. And environmentally, the Northeast Massachusetts is probably one of the diverse and special areas, I would say, if not the country and potentially the world, just because of the way it mixes urban and rural and wetlands and marsh and salt marsh. So I think that keeping this control and doing what you guys want us to do is the strongest way we can maintain our environmental responsibility and stewardship, and I look to you guys to help us do that.
You mentioned the town of Newburyport. It just jogged my memory. When I was a boy, my family had a cottage in Plum Island, the Newburyport section of Plum Island, and the planes would come over and they would just spray. And we were on the beach, we were pretty excited because we'd say, oh, there go the bugs. And, very little, if any, quality control going back years ago. And I'm going back last century, not 2 centuries ago. And you mentioned the diversity in this part of the country. North Andover, for example, with 27 square miles, much of which is, although it's a lovely town, marshland, swamps.
Swamps, you get triple E swamps. You don't have any triple E, and I'll leave you with some 3 drafts of the BMPs. They'll show you the little. You haven't had it here for a couple of years, but you've got some prime swampland for these melanora, these swamp mosquitoes. They get into the crypts, and they like to. That's where they like to. And that. So when triple E comes up, it's going to be those crypt mosquitoes that carry triple E, whereas West Nile is a different mosquito altogether. And we're looking at new ways to treat crypts in case it starts coming up more and more, because triple E made it all the way up to Maine a couple of years ago. So we definitely, it does pass through here, where years ago it didn't. It was way further south.
When I started doing this almost 15 years ago, the people that came to us talked about this being a 3-year cycle, and it would be here for 3 years locally, and it would go away for a while. Now there seems to be talk about it being really endemic in this area.
It is. They do say that, yes. We don't test birds anymore at DPH because it's here.
A dead bird is
And with climate change and these mosquitoes moving up, like Governor Cuomo just put out a press release for this lower part of New York, and he's doing a big deal on these Aedes albopictus, these Asian tiger mosquitoes. And part of the reason they can come up here, and part of the reason some of the ticks are coming up here, is that where cycles are getting. We lost the gypsy moths, like you care now. We lost them because we're not cold enough most of the time in the wintertime, but we're gaining all these tropical bugs that are coming back because we're getting very different climate changes. So it is, mosquitoes are going to be, they're a really good proxy indicator of climate, and I don't talk about that very much, but they really are a pretty good indicator of how the climate is changing. And these Asian tiger mosquitoes are going to be, as they move up with the tires and the warm weather, we definitely want to be aware of them, because all you need is a virus, a human, and the mosquito. Right now we have the humans and no mosquito, and the virus comes in as people travel. But as soon as we get at the trifecta in the wrong time at the wrong place in the summer, we'll have a little localized outbreak, but we probably won't get any of these tropical diseases permanently for a long time, but we'd like to be able to know what's going on with them.
So I guess I have 2 questions. Do we want to have them put into the BMP that same process we followed in the past, where when there's a local surveillance uptick, up mosquito, positive virus finding, that we take their advice in terms of deciding locally on some spraying, and the chair can then communicate with the board rather than having to have a gathering of the board to make that decision?
It worked well in the past.
It's for a couple years we've done that.
I'll double check to make sure the language is like that. In fact,
We didn't do it this year, but for several years in a row after that, in the late summer, we coordinate with you as well as with other communities locally and do school and ball yard perimeter spraying, just because that was the time everything seemed to come up. So we'd worked with the schools, and I think we've already started with the schools and started on not the BMP plan, the IPA plan, whatever.
Yep, IPM, the Integrated Pest Management, yep.
So that we're in compliance with the state law. And is there, being the community liaison, is there much role for coordinating communities? I mean, this is so geographical that it seems to come to all of us at the same time. And Methuen would be doing a lot of stuff the same time we would, and we'd kind of roll around. But
well, one of the things we're attempting to do with the boards of health meeting in April to start to coordinate an idea what is happening. We also have situations where there's communities that are not part of the program, so they don't get surveillance. And even though we've gone in and done surveillance, trying to protect other neighboring communities, we have some voids there that we have to handle. But definitely, we even talk about this, that there hasn't been a lot of cooperation among the districts, and we really want to push for that. I don't see, it seems like they've all been their own entities, and even we really need to work with Southern New Hampshire, things of this nature, because many of us are very close to that, and so I see
I see that definitely as an emphasis to try to coordinate more with the communities through the boards of health and through our staff doing more education. I think we're definitely going to have more
One of the
education.
key points for whether it's your surrounding towns, whether it's Methuen or Andover, and is, let's just start with your communities. Like, let's make sure that the catch basins after we treat them aren't immediately flushed, so we have to go treat them. Like, we would just like to do, I just came back from Andover literally last week saying, you know, can we go follow your DPW through the town, and we will larvicide afterwards, you know, so that we know that our 90-day briquettes are going to be in there for 90 days. Those are things of common sense that just we haven't had the manpower or the effort to make sure that we're communicating that, because no one means any bad things by it, but, you know, and if we find out that it's not a huge expense to go back and drop another 90-day briquette into your catch basin, but we have to know that happened. So we just need some of that kind of conversation. This will be my first full summer of operations. Like every new manager, I'm trying to only change minimal things until I find out exactly what a full year looks like. And then we'll put a 5-year plan in place in the fall. But part of it is communicating better with you guys. And mosquito has gone from nuisance to a board of health. It's a health issue, and it's becoming more so that. So this is probably one of the most important educated inroads into a municipality, because it's not just about nuisance for you guys. It's about what that means for your public health. And again, you do raise the tick question, and we do talk about what we're going to do about monitoring and education, and we do want to up our game in the monitoring and education space, but there really isn't good tick monitors and things like that. But we're starting to teach our own staff a little bit more about it. So especially rail trails, which are getting more popular, and you know, just to make sure people walking in areas we've done some surveillance, so we can have, at least give some municipalities some heads up about what we think might be going on. But right now, it's just education.
Now, that's really interesting, because when I work in my yard in the summertime, I'm dressed, fully dressed, long sleeve pants, shirts, spray, and so forth. But when I'm riding my bike on the rail trail, and when I fall off, I just have short pants on and a T-shirt. So I didn't even think of that, ticks and rail trails. Wow.
Ticks and mosquitoes. We're looking at both, because I think, especially for our communities that are trying to do mixed use, and the state's working a little bit more heavily on conservation and recreation, that the administration cares about both. I think it's important for us to be giving you guys the data that you need to be informed, because you're going to get the question. I'd like you to get the question about Zika. I'd like you to know way ahead of time that we're testing for that mosquito when we don't have it. I'd like you to know that next year, when it comes up with chikungunya, or God forbid we have a dengue case in the summertime, right? Because somebody came back with it and the mosquito had snuck in. Because they used to come up here back in the colonial days, right? The dengue mosquito used to come up with the colonial ships. It's a very good mosquito for ships. It likes people and clean water. So it used to like to come over on ships. So we could potentially, huh?
Joe's like that. He likes people in clean water.
But, you know, the Aedes aegypti is a great, I'm an entomologist, I apologize. It's a great mosquito to look at history and stuff. It came from Egypt on the ships, and it's completely different than the Aedes aegypti that's still in Egypt. And it's a great domestic mosquito, which is why it's such a problem in Brazil, because it loves to be around containers with a little bit of water. And it's just a hugely fascinating mosquito. I'll stop now. But yeah, we would like you guys to be ahead of that. Like, I get a little crazy when I hear the Zika stuff, but I can't tell you that the house mosquito that you're going to see in a couple of weeks. And like, for every one of you who have a pregnant friend, cousin, sister, brother, right, they're all going to panic, and they're going to say to you, what's going on? Because these little brown mosquitoes are going to come up next week, and they've all been sitting in the drain pools, and those are not going to be viral mosquitoes. For, you know, the mosquito that's a viral mosquito is a black and white mosquito. It likes warm weather. It's probably not going to be here. We're probably not going to have to worry about anything, but you epidemiologists, you medical people are going to have to worry about people-to-people transfer. I don't go there. But when it gets into the mosquito population, we don't have the mosquito at this point. So, and we can talk about if it, some people are saying that, last time I promise, people are saying that a mosquito will test positive for the virus, and that's a problem. It is, if the mosquito bites somebody with the virus, it will test positive, but the virus to go back into another person has to go through the gut, all the way through the saliva glands, and like every other being, there's a whole bunch of work that a little biological thing will do is when it ingests the blood, if the virus is in there, in order for it to get back out in the saliva, it's got to go all the way through the body, which is why only a few mosquitoes transmit virus, because not all mosquitoes have the gut bacteria that allow a virus to survive or survive long enough to magnify and transmit. And Aedes aegypti happens to be a very good virus for chikungunya, dengue, and Zika, but most of our other mosquitoes around here have a different gut symbiont that doesn't let that happen. But so there's all kinds of interesting things, but I think what you need to know is when you get the question, I want you to know you can call us. We'll give you the links to CDC, we'll give you the links to DPH, and we'll sit down and have a conversation with you about what we're finding in New Hampshire, and we'll have the neighborly conversation with you so that you don't always have to call Boston, who have a million other things on their mind. Katie Brown's a wonderful epidemiologist, but she's juggling a lot of plates right now. So our new entomologist, her name is Kim Foss, or myself, will try to stay up on things as much as we can.
What I like to do, and you presented a lot of what I'm going to do, but I wanted to just give a few basic points to the public out there on the Zika virus. Now, it's going to be very basic for you, but feel free to jump in. You're the expert, and I'd like to take advantage of your expertise in this. This is great. I mean, so I'm just going to give a few basic facts, very, very short, but most people have heard of it, don't have a clue what it is, don't care what it is, and because it doesn't affect them, but it could. There's a couple websites that I've gone to. New England Journal of Medicine has a reference website for Zika, and they're going to allow that as free reading, free text, no charge. So if you wanted to go to the New England Journal of Medicine website, you can get into various references for the Zika virus at no cost, and you don't have to join their subscription. Another website I went to is the CDC Center for Disease Control and Prevention. Great website, easy reading. It's meant for people just to go there and peruse and to find out what's going on. So I'm just going to give you, and again, I'm the student, you're the expert, Mary. So I'm just going to give you just a couple facts that people may not know. The Zika virus is now occurring quite heavily in South America, Central America, Caribbean, American Samoa, big time in Brazil, Peru, Puerto Rico, the hot climate weathers like you had mentioned before. And it's slowly progressing. As you mentioned, dengue. Dengue was one of the earlier ones that made it over here. And then it was back in the 1990s, you're going to have to help me with this, chikungunya.
Chikungunya.
Thank you. I asked my wife how to pronounce it.
Chicken with a gun.
Thanks a lot.
Chicken with a gun. Chikungunya.
And I think that started, I believe, in 2013. And then 1999, excuse me, was the West Nile virus, and then the chikungunya in around 2013 in that ballpark. And now we have the Zika virus. And the Zika virus can be very dangerous. It started, from what I read, in Uganda, in Africa, in 1947. So it's nothing that's new. It's just more prevalent now.
Sure.
As you had mentioned, the Culex, West Nile, the Aedes mosquito would be for the Zika virus.
Yep. Primarily Aedes aegypti. Yeah.
Okay, good, good. Zika is a disease caused by the Zika virus, and it's spread to people primarily bit of an infected Aedes species mosquito. Most common symptoms of the Zika are fever, rash, joint pain. I'm not sure why conjunctivitis, but I guess that's part of it. Usually people don't have a problem with it. It just goes away. It might last for 3, 4, 5 days, maybe up to a week. 1 in 5 people will have positive symptoms and become infected, but usually it goes away, I believe, within a week or something like that. I mentioned it's not a new virus. Let's see. One thing you'll find on some of the websites is they keep repeating themselves and repeating themselves on what it is. Who's at risk? Right now, I haven't found, as of last week, any active, in the United States, cases of Zika virus, unless you have any newer information. Mostly it's travel-related infected. They'll go to Brazil, they'll go to one of the areas that have outbreaks of Zika virus, and they'll get bit and they'll get infection. And then they'll come back here, and they'll show symptoms or they won't. I'd say people in good health, the symptoms will probably not manifest. As you had mentioned, John, if you're not in good health and you have a lower tolerance and immune system, they could appear. So anyone who travels to an area where the Zika virus is in danger of getting infected and have to be very, very careful. So travel's the biggest warning. There's no vaccine for Zika virus. It's basically mosquito-related control. DEET. How you might control mosquitoes now, if you're going out for a walk, you might want to spray one of the FDA-regulated sprays to control mosquitoes. And that's really all they can do.
Right.
And please.
I will only add to that it's a day biter mosquito, which is one of the reasons it's important to know it's an Aedes, and not a night biter like it is in malaria, like the Anopheles, which is malaria, which is a night biter. So some people will think a mosquito net will protect them, and they really won't. Another really good way to protect yourself from Aedes is to be in air-conditioned areas, because it doesn't particularly fly well in the cooler areas, which is why it's a problem in poorer areas than it is in more wealthy areas. It's also a very urban mosquito. It really likes to be around people and clean water, which doesn't happen in the wild. So all those considerations, but it's a day biter. It's an aggressive biter. Both Aedes aegypti and Asian tiger mosquito, they'll bite a lot below your knee. They'll bite your legs a lot so you don't see them. They're biting low, and when you swat them, they come back and bite again. So that's their behavior, and so that makes their behavior a little bit more specific, and they're also a beautiful, maybe you have to be me, but people who live in those areas usually can tell the black and white mosquitoes from the non-carrier mosquitoes, because Aedes is a pretty well-marked mosquito. But again, if you're a tourist, it's a mosquito is a mosquito.
Yeah. Okay. I'm not going to go over how to use the insect repellents, because we go over that every year, and plus it's on the CDC site. You never use one of the products, permethrin, which is the pesticide. You never use it on skin. So I would say go to the CDC site. It's a great site for telling you how to avoid mosquito bites and how to apply the product to your clothing. If you do get infected with the Zika virus, it's more supportive treatment. There is nothing else you can do. If you became infected and your doctor discovered that was the truth, you use acetaminophen or Tylenol. You don't use aspirin when it's viral, because sometimes aspirin can exacerbate certain.
Out of my league. Don't know the answer to that one.
Okay, I saw you looking at it.
No, I'm just laughing. I'm only thinking, I don't think I don't know that myself, so I'm making I've learned something, as I always do, as I already have.
You had mentioned with pregnant women, very, very dangerous. I'd say if people were traveling to go, or were planning on going outside the country to an area that has had an outbreak of Zika virus, they may want to consider either not going or speaking to their doctor about proper precautions. Extremely dangerous.
The World Health Organization, WHO site, is probably the place to go for that testing, because they've declared a high probability of causality, and although they haven't done the actual determination that it works, but they're throwing a lot of funding, and they have announced, the World Health Organization, the WHO, has declared that there's an association where pregnant women need to be careful of, and they don't know exactly why, but it's high enough commonality that the World Health Organization did step in on that one. Yes.
Okay. One of the real dangers with pregnant women, as you had mentioned, is that there have been reports of birth defects called microcephaly, which is a condition in which a baby's head is smaller than expected when compared to babies of the same sex and age. Very, very dangerous. So I caution anyone traveling outside, particularly women that are pregnant, either not go or seek proper counseling from your physician. I think that might be the best thing to do. Again, I'm just throwing some facts out. Besides being with the danger with pregnant women, also transmission can happen if you have the virus and it's active. It can happen through sexual transmission too. So I wanted to make sure to get that out. So, like anything, proper precaution is the best way to go. And I remember talking to Frank last month, and Frank was mentioning about the water. And I thought that was an interesting point in Brazil. He said that there was a thought that maybe the microcephaly was due to the pesticides in the water. And I thought that was an interesting point. And so I looked it up, and I'm just going to read a couple lines here. It says, several media reports in February 2016 suggested that a pesticide called pyroproxyfen, are you familiar with that?
I'm not, but I could look
That's
up.
probably just used overseas, might be linked to microcephaly. These media reports appeared to be based on a February 3rd publication authorized by an Argentine physicians organization, which claims that the use of a pesticide in drinking water in Brazil is responsible for the country's increase in microcephaly cases. Don't know if it's true, but then I was reading that they've been using this pesticide for decades, and they haven't had genetic changes like that. So they're still attributing it to the Zika virus. This is just something that they were thinking about, and Frank mentioned it about a month ago, or when I was talking to him. I found that very interesting, and I wanted to look it up. Let's see. And if you can add anything to it, please feel free, but that's what I wanted to talk about, just some simple facts on the Zika virus.
And I would only say that you will find more and more coming, particularly out of the Brazil and the games coming up, and there are some there are other theories that I have heard in addition to the ones that you've done, you've mentioned, and I would say that right now the World Health Organization has said there's a high chance that it is related, but no one has done the test to know exactly what the mode is or anything like that. So treating everything with caution is the best way to go.
You know,
Does your district include Lowell?
We do
Or
not.
Lowell the next?
We're the next one over. We go over. We go far as Methuen and Andover, and then we kind of fall into Lowell.
There's a high Portuguese/Brazilian population in Lowell, so it may show up there in time.
We've started doing more testing. We've actually put more surveillance in places like Breakheart, which tends to bring an urban population into kind of a mixed mode because there's a lot of people who. So we're starting to do a little more surveillance there, and I will talk to you guys about if anything pops up, but we are making sure that we're well circulated, all the urban areas on your borders to make sure that we have surveillance. So we catch anything coming from any place else.
I do have a couple more figures. I thought you might find this interesting. These are numbers as to what's going on. I'm going to go back a month. As of February 17th, in the United States, travel-associated Zika virus disease cases reported 82, and this is from the CDC. This is as of February 17th.
Last week it was 144.
A little higher, 258.
258?
Yes,
Whoa.
258. Locally acquired vector-borne case reported 0. Out of the 258, that's as of March 16th, Joe. Out of the 258 reported last week, 18 people were pregnant women, and 6 were sexually transmitted, how they occurred. For the U.S. territories, so you can see how what's going on. It's going to increase, and hopefully it won't make it here, but we'll see. U.S. territories, American Samoa, Puerto Rico, U.S. Virgin Islands. Travel-associated cases as of February 17th, 1. Now there's 3 as of last week. Locally acquired cases reported 9 as of February, 283 last week. So you can see that it's more and more prevalent, and you as the entomologist.
You need the people, you
Right.
need the virus, but for the mosquito to be involved, you have to have the right mosquito, and nobody's proven that we have the mosquito, and we haven't shown that it's even this far north at all. And it does come up in tires, though, so in a nice hot summer with a lot of tires hanging around, we could
Right.
potentially get a localized outbreak, which is not uncommon for chikungunya, dengue, and now Zika, because they're all, for some reason, the same mosquito family is able to proliferate the virus enough to spread it.
And here in Massachusetts, just FYI, travel-associated cases as of February 17th, we had 2 in Massachusetts. That's all I got, folks.
Now, it's interesting, I did read last week that it's 144, but that information could have been a little
It could have been
dated.
updated.
Exactly. So it seems like it's taken off.
Right.
Flying.
It helps when you know what you're looking for. It's like any detection in any epidemiological situation, right? You didn't know you have it, now you know you have it, now you're looking for it. So but yeah, absolutely. It's, so as you guys, as residents or your community gets concerned about it, I'll keep you absolutely abreast. I'm sure you all get the DPH notices, but we're out there looking, trying to be proactive to make sure that if we see any mosquitoes, I'm not sure DPH is screening for these viruses yet, but we're looking to make sure if we start seeing the mosquito, you'll know right away.
We're on the DPH site, but I know in the past, the district had a serve list that was to kind of us. Is that how you want to communicate, or you have that access to that, or when maybe get emails from Michelle when you're ready to start?
I'll
doing
work
that?
out, we'll definitely work out the best thing for you guys to do. I mean, my goal in the future is to have a website that you guys can get to, that you can get as many or as little notices, a dashboard for your community. We're not there yet, so whatever it is that we need to do, we'll try to do as we try to get a little bit more early surveillance. And the reason I want to stick with the Board of Health is I want to do preliminary work and verified work, and this community will understand the difference between we think we have it and they found it versus we think we have it, oh my gosh, let's panic now. I think we'll be doing different levels of validity testing that I think is easy to understand, that we'll treat it if we have a hint of it, and then we find a confirmation, then it's a whole other level of risk that we'll talk about. But I think we'll be good with what we have now so far, so be good. How exciting.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you
All right, well, thank you very much.
Get rid of them all proactively, so we don't have to deal with spring
Exactly.
in August.
Yeah.
Thanks for
absolutely.
staying. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
We need to wrap up one more item of business. We have, Larry, you have before you the meeting minutes from January 26, 2016.
Make a motion to, first of all, have everyone looked them over, or any problems?
They've
No
been
problem.
circulated
Okay.
around you.
Okay, make a motion to accept the North Andover Board of Health meeting minutes, Tuesday, January 26, 2016.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
So you can sign those. Again, we have no old business. We've already had some communication and discussion, so
I would like to make a quick point. March is the National Kidney and Colorectal Cancer Awareness Month. And consistent with this awareness, Dr. Frank McMillan and I are giving a presentation, or rather having a discussion at our senior center, 120 Main Street, this coming Monday from 10 to 11:30 on colorectal cancer from the perspective of a cancer survivor, me, and a gastroenterologist, Frank. So public is welcome to attend.
where did you say that is? One,
Senior Center.
the senior center, okay. Very good.
We did this about 5 years ago for the Eagle Tribune. And it was a very good article they had on it. We were just interviewed by Paul Tennant, I believe. He sat down with the both of us, and it was good. It's educational. And I did a lot of things wrong, an awful lot of things wrong, and I just said it as it is, and that's what I'll do this coming Monday. Did a few things right. I survived, but...
And that's the good part.
You got that one going. You do have that going for you, don't you?
Okay, did we miss any other items?
Sir, are you here for business tonight? Do you have any business before the Board of Health? Okay.
You just had to catch up on the sleeping.
All right, motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.